Okay, so the polished version of our game is really coming along nicely. In this video, we're going to take a look at changing out some geometry. Now we've got our enemy and our player. They are using very simple primitives at the moment. So it's time to bring in something a little fancier.
Okay.
And we're going to start with the player.
I missed the box already.
Do you now?
I do.
He served his purpose well. Both of them did, actually. They stood as great stand-ins while we prototyped out a game. Now the game is functioning, so it's time to bring in some nice geometry and see what the game's going to look like with
nicer geometry, anyway.
Okay, nicer. I mean, hey, it's still a 1980s style, very quick arcade game, okay?
That's true.
Well, I guess we can't really graduate to that step until I have the more advanced spawning system of our player, you know, where we blink and slide back on screen. So Zach has put together a simple ship inside of Maya. Took him about 10 minutes to do. Once complete, he then exported it out as an FBX file and handed it to me. So I'm going to bring it in, but the first thing I need to do is to create a new folder, and I am going to close some of these guys up just to make it a little bit easier. Oh, actually, I'll close everything up. So let's go ahead and create, and I'm sure by now you guys have seen the create button and you know that you can create stuff in here.
I was wondering.
Okay, I figured you may be, but I am, you know, of such a creature of such habit, and I'm so used to right-clicking and just working with menus. So I'm going to go ahead and right-click.
That's what you do in Windows.
Create a folder. This is true. My folder is going to be called Models.
I think it's what you do on a Mac, too.
There you go. So we've got models in. Now let's bring one in. So I'm going to come to the folder off the side of the recording area at the moment, and there's simple ship. Let's bring him on in, drag and drop. So the ship has been exported, and if I expand models, you'll notice that another folder has been created underneath it called materials, and we'll go ahead and leave that folder there. This is the material that was exported out with FBX. Mm-hmm. And and basically everything that we bring in FBX, it's going to continue, it being Unity, to put all of the materials for the different FBX models inside this materials folder. It'll keep things nice and clean so that I know that my models that are inside of the models folder have their materials close to them inside this particular materials folder. So we'll leave all of that at default. We don't have the texture in yet. We'll get to him in just a few minutes. First thing I'd like to do is simply swap out our geometry and see what happens.
Okay.
So let's come up here to our player, and then I'm going to go ahead and focus up on him inside of our scene panel here. This is about to be very important so that you can see what's going to happen with our size. Now, if you recall, our game object has a bunch of components attached, and one of those components was a mesh filter. The mesh filter component contains the actual geometry. The mesh resides here. At the moment, we've got this cube. If I was to drop this down, we'll find simple ship. So let's go ahead and put simple ship in there, and he's there, I promise.
It's tiny.
He's teeny. If I zoom in, whoa, a little bit too fast. There he is. So, you know, the first thing you may think is, oh man, let's start scaling this guy. No, we don't want to scale him. Let's jump back down here to our project folder. Come back down to simple ship, and what I'm going to do from here, up under the FBX importer, I'm going to simply set my scale factor to a value of 1. Now, if I were to scroll down in the inspector and hit apply, boom, much nicer. A little big, though. I mean, the box was big, without a doubt, but this guy's a bit bigger. So let's go ahead and select our player. Yeah, we can definitely see right there.
Compare it against the collider.
So I'm going to scale him down a little, and as I scale him, watch our box collider. So let's go with 1.2. You can see that the collider is adjusting with it now, but it's still smaller than the ship itself. It's very easy to reset the collider. You may think that you'd need to come down to that component. You could open up size, you can open up center, adjust the size, and then manipulate the center to get everything centered back up.
Kind of do the inverse.
A quicker way is just to come over here, drop down, click on the little gear, drop down, and hit reset. And that's going to simply reset the box collider to fit our geometry.
So like a bounding box.
You got it.
Gotcha.
So now that we've got that set up, let's spend just a second and talk about our collisions. Because earlier, having our cube represent our player, collisions, they worked beautifully. Because if we had a collision between our enemy and the corner edge of our player, it looked right because we were looking at a solid cube. Now we have geometry that is residing inside of our collider. what's going to happen if we get a collision that occurs in this corner? Well, we are going to get that collision. We will trigger our isTriggerEnter function, in which we will determine it was an enemy and we will explode.
That's when you get players who are like yelling at the screen going, hey, that didn't hit me.
Exactly. But, you know, this is one of those things where you need to make a judgment call yourself. And here's what I'm talking about. While you're playing, if everything's nice and fast and your guy's jumping all around and you have a collision between an enemy and the corner, but as far as things look on the screen, you'd have to be looking really, really, really close, and it has to be a slow-moving enemy, and then perhaps you could see it. You know, if that's the case, just go with something like the box collider. Using a primitive collider is far less expensive as far as processing is concerned. Switching this over to a mesh collider, on the other hand, will give us more accurate or very accurate collision results in this case, but at the expense of processing. Okay?
Now, by mesh collider, what do you mean?
Well, I could take this guy. So we've got a box collider, right? And come over here, and I can remove him. Now we have no collider. So if I was to play the game at this point, we simply can't collide. We don't get that function called for us. But with the player selected, if I come up to components, down to physics, and add a mesh collider, what we're going to get is a collider generated that is going to fit over this guy that will collide with other primitive colliders at the moment, not with other mesh colliders. We'll talk about that in just a second. So if I was to come back in here and hit play now, boom, we start colliding.
Oh, wow, you can see the collider too.
And so now much more realistic collisions. Well, already dead. How you like that? So boom. So as you can see on that one, it hit just right out at the tip of the wing. Here we go. Oh, so close.
So that's for like polygon accurate collision.
Exactly. So in this particular case, I think I'm still a little bit too far over. It is nice being able to pause the game and then simply step forward. And that is
move into it.
So close. Well, I can't.
Oh, okay.
So
it won't take input.
Let's go ahead and play again and see if I can. And it caught it.
Nice.
Okay. But we noticed we didn't trigger that up at the top. It was almost when the guy went off screen. So we got much better collision. But again, you have to ask yourself, do you really want to spend the extra processing power? Now, this is a very simple game.
Yeah, I don't think you'd need it for something like this.
In this case, yeah, flip it over to this guy. That's fine. But if you switch over to a mesh collider, just keep in mind things are going to get slower. If you got a lot of objects with mesh colliders on them, that can cause a problem.
Now, are you limited to just using the actual model itself?
The one that is generated? No, actually, I've got another very simple model that I can bring in right now. So let me go ahead and do that. So a simple ship mesh collider. We'll go ahead and bring that guy in over here. And then with him, before I use him, let's jump down here and set his scale factor up to 1. Jump all the way down. And you'll notice very simple representation of the volume of the ship. Let's go ahead and apply him. All right, so now that he's been applied, let's go back to our player. And with the player, just to demonstrate this real quick, if we were to take our mesh now, drop down, you'll notice that I can switch this over to different meshes. So I'm going to come down to the mesh collider.
Nice.
So take a look at that. So a little cheaper. It's still more expensive
than just a regular primitive.
That's right. But of course, with less polygons in here, there's less stuff to check. So it is cheaper on the processor. There's one other thing I would like to point out, and that is if this object here is going to collide with other objects that also have mesh colliders on them, you will need to make sure convex is checked. By checking convex, we can now collide with things other than just primitive colliders, meaning other mesh colliders. But there is a limitation that you need to keep in mind, and that is as far as the convex mesh collider is concerned, you're limited to 255 triangles.
Gotcha.
Okay? So just keep that in mind. So
now, I did want to say this, too. I mean, I know I've kind of been playing a little bit of the student role, though I did model out that ship for you. I also modeled out the collider.
That's right.
So I did want to say this. If you want to create similar models on your end, make sure that your collider box and whatever object you are colliding have their pivots in the same location, because FBX is using that pivot location actually from your file file, and then it's being placed in your on your ship or on whatever object you're creating a collision for based on that pivot. So if your pivots are offset, then your collision mesh is also going to be offset. Make sure your pivots are in the same location.
That's right. Okay, so that takes care of, we can just leave him like that. That works fine. So that takes care of collisions.
You can leave him yellow?
Well, it takes care of the collisions. We might want to take a look at the texture. So we're going to need a texture brought in. At the moment, we only have our screens and our stars large. So let's see. Over here in our textures, there is, there we go. Simple ship. Nope, not that guy. This guy. So let's go ahead and bring in a texture. So there he is, simple ship. Again, we're going to uncheck the generate bitmaps and reapply this. And now all we need to do is apply the guy to our material. So if I just grab player real quick and then grab my simple ship, drag, drop, there we go. Of course, you may be thinking, he's yellow.
He is yellow.
He is. Let's just come in here and reset our color back to white.
Oh, cool. So you can kind of modulate the color a little bit.
Yes, you can. So now we've got a ship. Let's go ahead and hit play, and boom, collisions work. And as you can see there, he hit the wing. Oh, and there's the wing again. Very nice. So we are having great luck with collisions, far more accurate than just a cube around it. But we have a problem after I start the game back again. And that is, let me shoot the gun. Zach, can you see what the problem is?
Is our gun firing from like deep inside the ship?
From deep inside the ship.
I mean, you could argue that maybe the center mounted gun is kind of up under the belly.
Yeah, you could, though it does look kind of funny that the whole nose begins glowing green as it is
it's a really powerful gun
shooting this guy off. So that is something that we may want to take a look at.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and jump back into our scripts. Now, in this particular case, we are firing from our player. So let's go ahead and bring up our player. So from inside here, let's see, back up to update. So inside of update, this is where we fire. And at the moment when we fire, we are, as far as Y is concerned, we are adding to Y the local scale of this guy. So that doesn't have us that close. We could change this over to our collider and use our collider's scale. So just to give you an idea of what that would look like, let's just go ahead. I'll delete all of this out and type in our collider dot bounds. Now we've got both center and size. So in this case, we want our size and we want Y. So this is going to get us a lot closer, but it depends on how centered the pivot is on the center of the geometry.
Right.
And if it's off just a little bit, which it is in this particular case, then we're going to end up with it still not being 100%
still being a little
perfect.
far back.
So by coming back in and hitting play, we're closer, but still we need to move up just a little bit. So a very simple way to do it, instead of even going through and doing all of this calculation in there to begin with, is simply coming up and creating a variable, a member that will allow us to put in an offset. And I can go ahead and make it public, and we can simply adjust it inside the inspector until we come up with something that we like. So we can just do a public float and call this something like projectile offset. Like such. So we'll go ahead and save this out. Let's wire them up too, instead of jumping over setting and then coming back. So back in here. Now we could tie this afterwards, but really.
If you're just going to offset it anyway, I just have one number.
You got it. Just have one thing and we'll take that calculation out. So now all I need to do is refer to my projectile offset. Simply add that to Y and good to go. So let's go ahead and save. Jump back over here. Of course, I have not offset it yet, so if we hit play, yep, we're shooting from deep in our ship. So now if we were to come over to our offset, so projectile offset, and let's move it up to, let's start with maybe 0.5 and hit play. And now let's just play with numbers while we'll try to avoid stuff. So 1. And let's not hit space when we're there. So real close. So maybe 1.2. And quick death.
That's better.
That looks much better. In fact, it might be. Oh, it's hard to tell.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think? Just go with that.
I just go with it.
So we've got a value of 1.2. So let's go ahead and jump back over here and take this guy and put in here equals 1.2 and I am going to switch him over to private because I'm happy with the way that looks, and I don't want to put everything as public. It's going to drive me crazy. All right, so we'll jump down here and just let's not do that. Wow, it actually, let's cut this back out again. Come down here and paste. Thank you, Windows. Okay, that was odd. So set back up, saved, come back in, hit play, and we no longer have the property over here to mess with in our inspector.
We've got it to the setting we want anyway. So
We've got it to the setting we want, and that looks fantastic.
Nice.
Okay. Very good. So I believe that's pretty much everything that I wanted to demonstrate in this video. We've got some new geometry in place for our player. We've gotten rid of that cube. That's excellent. We talked about the primitive collider that was on it, and we took a quick look at the mesh collider and even went as far as to bring in a custom mesh collider. Then finally, we took a look at the problem that had cropped up on us inside of our player script when we shot off our projectile. We went in there and we fixed it with a very simple offset. And with that, that is going to wrap up this video.